I'm joined for this interview by Professor Peter Fonagy, one of the keynote speakers for the Future of Neuroscience conference on the 18th and 19th of May 2019. Peter, you'll be discussing how neuroscience is informing a socio-communicative approach to change in psychotherapy. So I just wanted to start off by asking, what is the socio-communicative approach?
A socio-communicative approach is a recognition that psychotherapy is a form of communication, a form of social communication. People tend to consider psychotherapy as a world apart from all other human experiences. I think it's very important that we recognize that it is but a particular category or even a subcategory of communicative experiences governed by the same rules that all human communication is governed by.
The conference is about neuroscience. So in what way is neuroscience facilitating this approach?
I think our understanding of human communication has benefited enormously from understanding the components of that system, which we have been able to identify through an understanding of brain function. The study of neuroscience is helpful to the study of behavior, mainly in identifying for us what are the key components of any particular large category of human endeavor that actually falls in reality, falls in on each other. Communication is perhaps a particularly important aspect of this. And what I think we have learned is that relevance or relevance theory, as it's called nowadays, is a critical aspect of communication based on particular aspects of brain function. So understanding the perspective of the listener actually presumes developing an image of the listener's mind. This so-called theory of mind network, I believe, is critical to the aspect of human communication which psychotherapy entails. I think that the therapist's capacity to represent to the patient their dominant personal narrative, the dominant self-narrative, which is actually imagined by that person rather than necessarily the realistic presentation of it. But the person imagines a self-narrative. The therapist is able, by working in the ways that they are able to work through understanding the perspective of the patient, recognizes that self-narrative, but not only recognizes it, but actually is then able to represent it or communicate that self-narrative to the patient. And the patient then, in turn, is able to perceive or apperceive that representation. This is the key communication structure that underpins any kind of psychotherapy, regardless of modality, regardless of orientation. Because this, in the patient's mind, enables an epistemic match, a match between one aspect that is to do with an imagined self-narrative, another aspect which is a perceived narrative that they have identified in the patient, in the therapist's communication to them. And if the two match, they form a good contact with one another. This initiates an experience of trust, which opens, if you like, the patient's mind, opens an epistemic superhighway, opens a knowledge pathway into the patient's mind that makes the therapist a very important communicator of meaning, an important communicator of knowledge, an important communicator of advice, which then the patient can take, adopt as their own, and modify their behavior accordingly. I do not think that unless we decompose communication into components of representing the view of self and other, and also the capacity to match the two, these are essential aspects, I think, of self and other interaction, or some people call it co-consciousness, if you like, or certainly an aspect of interpersonal relationship, which I think underpins all aspects of psychological therapy.
You'll be discussing change in psychotherapy. What changes would you like to see in psychotherapy based on the input from neuroscience?
Changes that I hope will happen is a very simple understanding that psychotherapy occurs in the brain, and the brain does not recognize different modalities of psychotherapy. That by and large, the change process which psychotherapy initiates in the human mind is mediated by the same brain, regardless whether that's cognitive behavior therapy, family therapy, psychoanalytic psychotherapy, client-centered therapy, or indeed dialectic behavior therapy. It is occurring in the same brain, and that brain is what sets the limit on an individual human's capacity for change. Recognizing that different orientations are just different approaches to the same underlying process that occurs at the level of brain function is, I believe, the critical understanding that will take the field forward.
What do you think delegates will gain from attending the Future of Neuroscience conference?
Therapists who attend a conference like this gain not so much from the knowledge that modern neuroscience imparts that will enable them to become better therapists. Much more important, I believe, it gives them a grounding in the basic psychological processes that they, knowing or unknowing, they make use of in their daily work. And it is the understanding of those basic processes. It is the working with the mental processes that all of us need to encounter in all aspects of our daily lives that enables us to be more sophisticated in the way we use the systems of communication that is available to us. It helps in two dominant ways. It sets a ceiling on what can be achieved, what the degree to which individuals can change the way they are. They can modify their own actions, their own behavior, their own states of mind. It gives you a set of constraints on expectations. But even more important, I think it gives you a very real sense as a therapist that actually you are dealing with a person who is troubled by a wide range of concerns in addition to the ones that you impose on the individual. It puts you in your place, if you like. The brain is a complicated organ. It does very many important functions, many even more important, dare I say, than psychological therapy. And to be able to place psychological therapy into that continuum of activities, it kind of makes for humility in a profession that is sometimes not particularly characterized by modesty.